It's big news. For those that aren't familiar, Steven Crowder was accused of wrongdoing by a former employee, Jared Monroe, who raised, as of this morning, $72,000 for legal bills. Steven Crowder, prominent conservative streamer, has filed a lawsuit accusing Jared Monroe and Hillary, his, I believe it's his current wife. I think they're not yet fully divorced.
No, they're not.
Of an extortion scheme. Here's a quote from Jared Metello. "I just don't want Steven Crowder anywhere near those kids," said in a text message to Hillary Crowder. Now, I will state again for anybody who's just tuning in, it is in fact a slow news day. So welcome to the biggest stories we have of the day. I do think this is an interesting story because it plays into, we're dealing with the alternative media landscape, which we don't talk about quite the independent media landscape. We are standing, my friends, on the precipice of what media may look like for the next 100 years. And you have no opportunities in that with, say, like NBC or ABC. Like, you're not going to go to ABC and say, change everything you do and do it my way. But with independent media, we are all standing here as personalities on X or Instagram or commenting on YouTube. And actually, we are laying the groundwork for what this media environment will be because we know the corporate press is dying. I certainly think that is a good reason to take the time periodically, even if it is a slow news day, to address these stories and figure out what's going on, because this story with Crowder has actually divided people, with many conservatives saying Crowder's wrong, he's a bad guy, he's abused his staff, and others saying that his ex-wife seems to be engaged in an extortion scheme to try and force a settlement that would be more favorable than the courts would actually allow. The story right now is, the gist of it is what I gave you. SCNR has the story. According to court filings, Steven has been ordered to pay Hillary $25,000 per month in support for the last 2 years. However, in a recent social media post seeking employment, she claimed she could no longer afford to be a stay-at-home mother. Reason being, she has to pay a separate lawyer because she's now being sued over this extortion scheme. I believe it's what's happening. So this is where we're currently at. According to Steven Crowder, his wife, I guess, I don't know, we would say ex-wife, but they're still in the process of being divorced, said that he wanted to put together a PR strategy of some sort. They brought on a PR guy. It really does look, in my opinion, I'm not saying Crowder's innocent or a good guy, but it does look like his wife orchestrated this whole thing, or her dad did, with former employees who are disgruntled to launch a PR campaign that would damage Steven Crowder's business, Louder with Crowder, so that she could get a favorable settlement. In some of these messages that are published, I think it might be this one. She says, when it came to the children, his offer was, I get all of June, some of July, and 2 weeks in August, and a week in the fall. And while that's better than what I would get in court, I want more freedom than that. So here's the current. I don't know what else to add to it. I mean, I'm curious as to who you guys think is in the right or wrong on this one, and welcome to what we have for the day, I guess.
The whole thing is, commenting on these things kind of sucks, but like, look, if you're going to be paying alimony and paying for someone else's essentially life, it's really rough to be like, you have to pay for them to pay for a lawyer to sue you and try and take your kids away.
Well, so I think Crowder is suing Hillary for the extortion scheme, and she has to defend herself. So Steven, here's what they've said. Steven Crowder is in a divorce proceeding, and the Crowder estate has to pay all the legal fees for both sides. Separate from that, Crowder was ordered to give his wife $25,000 per month. She is using that on legal fees because I believe Crowder initiated a suit against her for launching a PR campaign, an extortion campaign.
In order to influence the final judgment in her favor.
In the divorce court.
Right.
And so now, because she has to hire lawyers for that separately from divorce, she's now saying she can't afford to be a stay-at-home mom because all that money is going to legal fees. I personally think, in the bigger scheme of things, it is insane that Crowder is being forced to pay legal fees that are being used against him. She should not be allowed to, in my opinion, and we got a couple of conservative women are telling me I'm wrong. The idea that the state would compel a man to pay his wife money for child support that she would then use instead for legal fees after she got sued, to me sounds wrong.
But she wouldn't have to use those for legal fees if he wasn't suing her, right?
Right. So the issue is, I suppose, in the end, who was at fault? considering where they currently are in the suit, I don't think Steven Crowder's lawsuit is without merit, in which case it appears on the surface, and I don't know anything about these people, his wife did wrong. He sued her over it. And now she's using child support to pay the legal bills. So Crowder's effectively funding the legal challenge against him. This is just insane.
I mean, I don't know all the particulars here. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance that you could probably dig through. But I mean, my parents were divorced. My wife's parents are divorced. Both of us just have a really nasty view of people that get divorced. And when I see stuff like negotiating about when you can have your kids and I'm going to have them for this time and this time, it's just like it's really aggravating for me because it's just I don't understand why people that get married end up acting like children. I understand. I mean, it gets really complicated, but I just have a lot of contempt for people that can't just work their stuff out for the sake of their kids. That drives me crazy.
And Stephen and Hillary's kids are young, right? They're
exactly.
They're not. Like
that's my
adolescents.
understanding. Yeah, and that makes it extra painful to listen to this unfold.
So we had this big story the other day where the former employee of Crowder came out and said, I'm being legally abused and, I need money for my legal defense and all that stuff. And my former employer did this. My former employer did that. It was crazy to me because the fundraiser, it raised at the time, I think $72,000. Actually, let me see if I can pull it up and see what the current number is at. Let's see. Here we go. It's currently at $78,000. So what struck me as odd right away, and I don't know this guy, okay, and people are like, Tim's friends with Crowder, so he's defending him. I'm like, dude, I've talked to Crowder a dozen times the entire time I've known him in 8 years. No, I don't have regular communication with Crowder at all. But he said that he's under this restrictive NDA, but the video fundraiser violated the NDA in a whole bunch of different ways. So I'm like, something doesn't add up. If he's clearly willing to violate the NDA and disparage and release private information about the business operations, he clearly doesn't care about the NDA. So what is the money for? I mean, it doesn't seem to make sense to me. And then you have this quote from Crowder's lawsuit where Jared said, I just don't want him anywhere near those kids. That really, really disturbs me. That one really pissed me off because I'm like, do people realize they're donating to a guy who's trying to take his kids away from him? You know what I mean? Like, that's between the divorce court. A former employee who's pissed off about a business dealing, intervening and saying, I don't want that man to have his children. That one pisses me off.
Do you think this Jared character thought that he was skirting the NDA by not naming Crowder in that video? You don't think so?
No way. Like, anybody who's spent a second in court knows the judge gives you that eye and says, don't play games. And there's no way this guy has a lawyer that he needs to pay who didn't explain to him by saying wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you have violated your NDA and the non-disparagement and non-disclosure. So I got people hitting me up and be like, no, Tim, Crowder's a bad guy. This proves it. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, coming out and being like, I don't want him to have his kids is a dark thing to say. Seems like, it seems like it's, I'll keep it simple, I suppose. None of this should be public, I guess.
Yeah, this is not a topic that I follow, but even just in a couple last days, it's percolated to the level that I've seen it. And now other people are arguing about it. I'm like, what's that crazy woman's name? Pearl?
That's
What's that crazy woman's name?
Yeah.
Well, now it is.
Look, I have her. I put her on mute on the media that I'm on. I put her name on the blocked list of terms, and I'm still seeing posts about her. And now she's coming at people who are,
Well, she was right about this. When the Jared thing came out, she tweeted, I bet this is all being orchestrated. Well, I shouldn't say she's right, but she was right about Crowder's perspective. She's like, I bet this was all his ex-wife orchestrating this. And then Crowder puts out a bunch of files where it really does. Look at this. You have this big, long message from, I believe it's his wife's dad saying, here are the goals I have for this. Someone who understands and can, Stephen in the world and the things that would destabilize him. Fully understand that Hillary's goals and expectations for the outcome of the divorce are reasonable and attainable, not necessarily according to Texas family law precedent, but by employing a media Brian Friedman PR strategy that will significantly threaten his public persona and brand. I got to tell you, I'm biased. I'll tell you my bias right now. We have had I've talked to a bunch of people who have been run successful businesses, and everybody who does has the same story where it's like you get stabbed in the back by 100 different people. And you could have an instance where an employee, say, is caught stealing from you. So you have him fired. That person immediately goes to the press and claims malfeasance, wrongdoing, false accusation, because they were the one who actually did wrong. And they know that the media is going to want to eat it all up. So there's my bias. I'm like, when I see this and I see that statement, I'm like, been there, done that. They know that what they would end up getting in family law would be lower than what they want. So they want to employ a PR strategy to damage Steven Crowder's public persona, knowing he can't do much to fight back, and it's going to cost him money to force him into settling. Dirty games.
You don't get into more extreme dirty games than divorce. I mean, all the gloves come off, and it's really ugly.
I am extremely fortunate that my divorce was not ugly. We didn't have kids.
You see, that's the other thing, is it's the idea that kids are involved is just it's really disturbing.
Yeah, because if you got kids, nobody's going to be like, I don't care what happens to the kids. It was real easy for me to be like, you take that stuff, leave my stuff alone, see ya, right? Like, it was totally cool, totally amicable. But obviously, if there was kids involved, you're like, well, I love my kids. I want to see my kids. And then people will start using their kids against the other one. And you know, it degrades and gets so ugly so fast.
And it all becomes about the parents, ultimately. You know, it just becomes a push and shove battle between them for the most part. And
it is really crazy, the stories I've heard about divorce, like especially in response to this. I think Mike Cernovich had a post where he was like, you'll see two people arguing over who gets to keep a house that neither wants, neither will live in, and isn't even worth anything to sell, just because they hate each other so much.
Yep.
Crazy stories I've heard where like an ex-wife will demand the dog and then kill the dog as soon as she gets it.
Oh God, I would.
Dude, I've heard personal stories from people I know where it's like they demanded the cats in the divorce and then put them down instantly. Like, just because they hate
Just
you.
out of spite.
Yeah.
TOS violations. Terrible things I'm thinking. You can't do that to a living animal. And
right there with you, Phil.
It's so bad.
Chris, what you were saying earlier about respecting people who can work out their differences, this comes down to that. I mean, unfortunately, some marriages are not going to last. They're going to end in divorce. But, you know, people who can actually have a commitment to it and try and work it out, I respect them a lot more. I just think there's too many people out there now that look at marriage as like a temporary thing that I can just dissolve at any point in time and
Dating
I'm gonna flip
extra.
a switch. And it's time to swipe right.
Well,
You know?
it's a generational
And I don't think
thing.
that.
I blame Reagan.
Yeah.
Reagan's the no-fault divorce
No-fault
guy.
divorce, right. But you like my grandparents' generation, that wasn't really a thing. You know, if anything, like my grandparents got divorced, but they were in their 70s. You know, I mean, like you know, and the generation that predates them, like that just wasn't something that was a possibility. They just worked it out, and they lived together and hated each other, but they still had 13 kids. You know, and they passed on some sort of worthwhile values instead of just saying, no, I'm out and I hate you. Give me the dog. You keep this. You know, and just going through this whole process.
We got to
it's
get
insane.
rid of no-fault divorce.
Yeah.
And then people say, yeah, but then what about false accusations? And it's like, you know, we had this argument about abortion with Seamus, and Seamus says, yes, if you ban abortion, there will be back alley abortions. There will still be less abortions. It's like, what do you do? People are going to commit crimes. It doesn't mean you don't stop. You don't say this should be illegal or something, not to start an abortion argument. But when it comes to no-fault divorce, people say, yeah, but then the wife will just falsely accuse the man. And it's like, perhaps. But the issue here with like Crowder and Hillary, you have kids. You've entered into a covenant. Mm-hmm. You have sworn till you die. I think a judge should be like, you both need to calm down. You both are responsible. You both have kids. You will not yell in front of these kids. You are responsible for this family. And we are going to be, you know, keeping track to make sure that you're not, you know, acting in violation. Otherwise, don't get married. Mm-hmm. The idea that we just made it so marriage could be dissolved instantly because the easy way out is the stupidest thing. With no-fault divorce, marriage no longer exists.
Well, think about this too, Tim. Though, when no-fault divorce came out, it was much harder to get any type of actually evidence against your spouse. So fabricating stuff, and it was also hard to defend yourself. All right, look at Nathan Wade and his cell phone tracking records with Fonnie Willis. You know, like now there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. So the argument that you need no-fault divorce because you couldn't prove anything or couldn't defend yourself isn't there anymore, because now there's just a lot more ways to prove where you were at, who you were talking to, The fault should be something that could be easily determined and defended against now. So maybe there's not as much utility for that.
I don't know, man.
I
Wild.
I like the concept of making some way. I like the concept of incentivizing people to work out the relationship. If no fault divorce goes away and that does it, fine. I don't have any particular love for any policy. I am sympathetic to the people that make the arguments that say, look, there are people that are going to be victimized because of this, that there will be negative externalities that happen. But like Tim said, that does happen with every single policy the government passes, no matter what it is. It can be something as innocuous as, I don't know. It could be something very small, but still have ramifications that spread through the economy and have negative effects in people's lives, and you'll never realize it. So that being said, I do think that, like I said, there should be some kind of way to incentivize what you want society to do. You want society to get married and have kids. That's what if there is a role for government, if government is legitimate, promoting families that make more of the society in what would be considered traditional families, that should be a role of the government. The government should not be in the business of looking for of centering the margins, is the word that the left used. The government shouldn't be in that business at all.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.